Welcome to the Bitcoin Zodiac, the podcast that explores the intersection of finance and astrology, where we use a combination of spirituality and logic to help us connect the dots in the markets. Hosted by Corinne Florence and Claire Marinan, who both come from a diverse background, bringing with them a wealth of knowledge and experience in the realms of astrology, cryptocurrency, trading, philosophy, investment strategy, and of course, Bitcoin. In each episode, we explore the economics of the markets following the evolution of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency through each moon cycle and astrological transit. Join us on this journey as we explore the intersection of these two worlds that are often thought to be at odds with one another, finance and astrology. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor, a day trader, or just starting to dip your toes into the world of Bitcoin and blockchain, the Bitcoin Zodiac is the podcast for you. So sit back, relax, and come and expand your consciousness with us as we explore the world of the financial markets through an astrological lens. Good morning.
Good morning and good evening, still from the portal of 808 out here in Florida.
Yeah. Wow. How was it for you?
It was full of energy as expected. I had some beautiful, long, unexpected naps. And just really sat with myself and journaled and was just so grateful to God for life, and already grateful for all of the beautiful things that I know He's going to bring. Finally got to the ocean again, which was really nice. I don't know why I'm saying finally. It's probably been like 3 days since I've been, but it felt like a really long time.
That's a long time for a Floridian.
Florida problems, right? When I have it across the road. But that was just really nice. We had the most beautiful sunset. I was like, yeah, there's my confirmation. Thank you so much.
Stunning.
So yeah, what about you? How was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, the portal of it, I just had, like, it just felt like a massive influx of energy. I was literally wide awake for the probably 3-4 days even prior to the actual pinnacle of it. I was like awake at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just like, what is going on, you know? But it's interesting because it's not like I was like lying in bed going, I'm so tired, but I just can't sleep. I was literally like ready to go, awake, wide awake, and full of energy at like 3-4 in the morning, and I'm like, oh. You know, I'm good because I know I'm going to be shattered the next day. But I think this is where, like, it's incredible to have the awareness of what is going on in these times, because previously or normally when I can't sleep, I find it really stressful because I just am like, oh, I know I'm going to be shattered the next day and I have things to do and things like that. Whereas because I knew that we were in this window of, you know, very high frequency, high energy, like a lot of energy coming, I was able to just go, okay, this is obviously how my body is integrating this. I'm just going to receive it. And so I spent this specifically yesterday. I spent it up by the pool and just journaling and meditating and, you know, just getting a lot of downloads about the future of what we're building here with this podcast, and just getting, you know, just really expansive kind of time for things like that. So I thought it was really positive. I am shattered, don't get me wrong, because I've had like no sleep for the last week, really, or, you know, only a couple of hours each night. But I just kind of like surrender to that, and I'm like, okay, you know, this is the period that we're in. It doesn't last forever. I will sleep again, and and allow that energy to do its work and really upgrade us. All of those light frequencies really upgrading us.
Yeah, the upgrades. I love just that key word. And I feel like it's been for me really ever since the full moon. For me, it was the full moon. Don't know if it was because my birthday and I couldn't sleep because it was like the countdown to the birthday, or if it was actually like because of the full moon. But that was one night that I definitely like couldn't sleep properly. And ever since then, upgrades and downloads. But what I mean by upgrades is just like, I even like caught myself in my way of like thinking and like my desire to like want to like know more and be more and go and do more, which sounds kind of like normal for me, but it's like this extra level. It's like a deeper level, like a deeper desire for knowingness. Yet I feel like I can say maybe this is the first time in my life where I'm also just in so much faith and just peace of like, but I know that it's all going to be so okay and it's all going to like work out. And just the craziest things have been coming to me, not even just in ideas, but like opportunities as well, which hopefully one day soon we'll be able to integrate with the podcast here as well. And I'm excited for everything that's to come. So yeah, it's just been very intense energies, but beautiful energies. I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, Leo season's really your time. Like, I love Leo season 2. It's one of my most favorite times of year, because it just feels, I don't know, it just feels really uplifting, really powerful, really expansive. And so we are heading into this new moon, Leo new moon. So it's
right. And I feel like this new moon, because it is in Leo, is, you know, we've just released a lot with this Aquarius full moon, the super moon, which was huge.
Yeah.
And now that we've released things, and I'm sure that we're continuing to, you know, I'm sure many of you are finding very interesting things coming up with relationships, whether it be, you know, romantic or family or friendships, or even, you know, business, career, work relationships. And we're seeing a lot of the hard conversations needing to be done, sometimes with others, sometimes with self, a lot of releasing. And maybe this is a really big time of shedding and letting go of relationships. And this is all because of also the Venus in retrograde that we're going through right now. And we released it all, or started to release it all, with this Aquarius full moon. And now as we head towards the new moon in Leo, it's like okay, now that I've taken weights off my shoulders, let me reset and really put things into action. Like, I feel like with this new moon, such a big thing, it's like destiny's calling you and you're ready to like take massive action. And it's kind of also like the luxurious side of Leo, where it's like things are finally going to pay off. And that kind of feeling around this.
Yeah. Yeah. And leaning into harvest time, like ready for the fall harvest. Wow, that's awesome. And it's so interesting you say that about the shedding of relationships. I mean, not so much actually in my personal life, but a very, very close friend of mine has really been going through it since that full moon. And just, you know, a lot of things coming up with people that she's, you know, given so much to, and realizing the reality of the shifting of those dynamics. And I mean, I always think that it's sort of one of the hardest lessons to navigate, that when, you know, when you up level and when you lift your frequency, there are going to be people in your life that you love and you appreciate and you value, but they're not operating in the same space. And so you're not going to take everyone with you, and they're going to go and do their own thing. It's not like, oh, well, I'm higher and they're lower. It's not about that. It's just about each other's life journey. And sometimes the frequencies don't match in the same way that they used to. And it's such a difficult lesson to just be able to release that gracefully, or allow the dynamics of a friendship to change gracefully. You know, it's painful. It's painful. There's no way around it. It definitely is painful, but it's also, you know, it's also a really good thing. It's also a really good thing.
And you know,
space for.
we've spoken about the fact that you know, I don't think that there is good and bad emotions. Just all emotions just are. And pain is just a part of life, like growing pains, you know, when you're going through puberty, oh, it hurts. All of us go through it. And the pain is just a part of it. And so,
And it
you
doesn't
know,
last forever. It doesn't last forever.
exactly. It's temporary. And as we just go through these upgrades, that's a part of the upgrades. It's the letting go. And like you said, it's not because you're leaving people behind and below you, but it's just a breaking off of different paths. And as we grow, that's just what happens. You know, I just look at it even in nature. It happens in nature and we're a part of nature. So gratitude for the moments that people were in our lives, and we release them, send them love and light, and wish them the best. And maybe paths meet again, or maybe not.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just is. Yeah. And yeah, I was going to say, and speaking of breaking off, Bitcoin finally broke above a little bit. Oh, it's been kind of
boring.
At a macro level, we're like, yawn. I mean, if you guys are intraday trading, you know, there's scalping opportunities. But not gonna lie, it's just been boring. But it is nice to see Bitcoin. So as we're recording this, guys, it is the 8th of August in Florida, 9th of August out in Thailand. And, you know, we were mentioning in the last podcast that we were really just waiting for that fake out at the full moon in Aquarius, which it did. Sneaky little Aquarius. It broke out, tricked everybody, came back down, and now it's just doing its natural kind of turn and moving up towards the new moon in Leo. But I don't really have much more to say for what's happened so far because it's been boring.
Yeah, it's just in that period of really in this consolidation period. And I think in terms of Leo, it's also, you know, in a way, we're really in the soup, you know, with in terms of macro, there's a lot of things there's a lot of moving parts that are going on. And I always kind of just have been looking back at this time of like, I'm really sort of impressed how Bitcoin has sort of held through this though. And it doesn't go through this big drop off at the hint of any kind of bad news. You know, it's kind of just stayed stable. I'm not saying that is, you know, it's always like it's going to do that. You know, there are other aspects that will influence that. But I'm, you know, I sort of look back at this time when we've seen periods of bank collapses and all of these different things, new technologies being introduced. And Bitcoin has been boring, but it's like not been, at least it's not been exciting to the downside. But so I think it's just sort of, it's what it has sort of given me, the impression it's given me is that like, look, I'm still not ruling out a 10K Bitcoin, guys. I'm absolutely not ruling out. I'm not saying it's going to stay stable for a while. In fact, the astrology we're going to talk about shortly is not leaning towards that. But I sort of feel that this period, it's like Bitcoin has sort of proven its ability to sort of stand through the storms. And it's not so swayed back and forth by the winds of change, you know, that's going on in the macro environment. And I'm really impressed by that. It's sort of establishing its own identity. And I think that really ties in with Leo, you know, because Leo's so much about confidence and creativity and, you know, even a desire for recognition. And so it's like, let's give that recognition to Bitcoin. Like, we're pretty impressed at how you've navigated this and how you've weathered a lot of these storms. But moving forward, coming up, we've got some interesting things coming up.
Oh boy, do we? And last episode, we actually spoke about Venus retrograde, the importance that that has on the financial markets. And we spoke about this key date of the 13th of August, which is the Venus inferior conjunction with the Sun in Leo, and how this is such a key turning point, usually, for Bitcoin. We also see it in indices such as S&P 500, which is one that I've gone and back tested in regards to this. And this is where we're potentially seeing a bit of a turnaround. And before we even go into that, Claire, what else did we say and find out that is happening on the 13th of August?
Yeah, so we have Kathy Wood, the deadline. Kathy Wood's been on some interviews this week because the deadline for the SEC to sort of, I won't say make a ruling, but at least make a comment to respond to the ARK Invest 21 shares ETF application. So 21 shares is a Swiss-based company, and ARK Invest is headquartered in New York. And they refiled for a spot Bitcoin ETF in April after the SEC rejected its previous attempt in March 2022. And so on the 13th of August, they essentially have to approve, deny, or delay the Bitcoin ETF application. Now, Kathy Wood herself has sort of come forward and said she expects the 13th to come and go, and they will just ask for more time, because she believes that when the SEC does approve an ETF, it won't be just one they approve. They'll approve multiple at a time. So the process is kind of like that the SEC registers, adds it to their official register, the applications, their official register, and then they have a 240-day process period, which is broken up into 4 periods of 45 days, 90 days, and 60 days. And at the end of the first 3 periods, the SEC must either, plan to launch, allow the product to launch, block it, or again, ask for more time. So Kathy Wood herself has said that, there have been multiple applications. The SEC just added Bitwise's application to their federal register, kicking off that 240-day processing period for them. And then there are also similar funds by BlackRock and Fidelity and others that, are expected to be added to the register as well, sparking that 240-day period. So I think what Kathy Wood is seeing is that they're going to ask for more time, and they will probably, add these at similar times. But what's quite interesting with these is one of the things Kathy Wood said as well is that, what will happen with these multiple ETFs, what multiple approvals will mean is that they won't actually really differentiate themselves really through the product, because they're very, very similar, but it'll more be how they market it, how they communicate it. And, really it'll be up to investors to choose which company they like the most, which company they trust the most, and that sort of thing. But either way, it is, that is bullish for Bitcoin's price action. They are all applying to have their Bitcoin custodied with Coinbase. So that is quite a, centralization of the Bitcoin supply, which is, we love decentralization as much as possible. And so we love it. It doesn't mean that Bitcoin itself is not being, the network is still decentralized, but there's quite a concentration of the money supply, the supply of Bitcoin sitting with Coinbase. But they will also have to hold these, that spot Bitcoin. So that will probably be bullish for the price of Bitcoin, because they'll need to pick that up. Although don't rule out also before that period a sharp drop in price, like a pushing down of the price, so that these kind of big entities are not going to be buying Bitcoin at 30K. Let's big amounts of Bitcoin at 30K. I mean, it's not like they're going on to Coinbase and buying it on the exchange anyway. These are all OTC transactions, of course. But you know, if you kind of see that fluctuation, I am expecting some kind of, you know, big pullback before those ETFs are released. To you know, to be, it sounds a bit conspiratorial, but it's really not. That's just how the markets work, you know? And
I mean, it's not conspiracy at all. I mean, this is where you just really have to think about it literally, like, logically. You have these massive companies, right? Let's just go with 101 terminology. Massive, powerful companies that know that even right now, with what I believe is very decentralized, if not the only decentralized asset that we have out there, they still have the power to be able to somewhat manipulate the price in comparison to the US dollar. So if that means that they have the ability to go and manipulate the price of the US dollar, you think that they're not going to drop it lower than $30,000 to be able to get their hands on more of this incredible asset at a lower price? Like, I don't think that's conspiracy at all. It just makes sense. Like, it's just like, duh.
It's that's what I mean. It sounds conspiratorial, but that's literally the way it works. Because if you're an entity and you have market moving capital, and you need to accumulate a certain asset, like, they have to accumulate that. I'm sure they already are and already have been and already, you know, have a lot anyway, but I'm not saying that they don't. But they have to be able to move the market in a way that allows them to get a favorable entry. So don't rule that out and think that it's entirely bullish news. It is bullish for the price, I think, in the long run, but there may be a sharp pull down in that respect at some point.
Yeah. And you know what's so interesting? So you were talking about the 240 days, right? So, and correct me if I'm wrong or if I misunderstood this, but what you're saying is, so from the day that they will actually go and approve the ETF, then they still need the 240 days to put it all into action, correct?
No, this is the application process. So when they apply, and then the SEC adds it to their federal register, which starts that period where the SEC has to do something. So they have different markers at the 45-day mark, and you know, throughout that, and then they have to, so 45-day, 90-day, and then 60-day. And so the SEC has to, you know, give some indications of whether they're approving, whether they need more information and they need more time, or whether they're denying. They have to, so that the SEC basically can't just sit on the applications for eternity.
Of course.
And just never approve.
Makes
so
sense.
And sometimes it takes a while from when they announce that they're going to apply for it all for it to actually get on that register, that federal register, and then kick off that process, that timeline.
Gotcha. And so if the SEC was to, on this 13th of August, if they do want to buy more time, it's not going to automatically reset another 240 days, or could they?
No.
They just choose how long the time.
Yeah, they then have to, they also then have to, then the next point of call is 90 days after that.
Okay. I was just looking and I was like, 240 days from the 13th of August is essentially exactly around the next Bitcoin halving. But guess that's maybe not associated, but fun fact, guys, precisely 252 days to the next Bitcoin halving.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because this is the process. It's only ARK Invest that they need to make a call on the 13th. Yeah. So what this article was also saying was that you know, BlackRock and Fidelity, theirs haven't actually even been added to the register yet. So there's you know, so they won't be like live or approved for a minimum of 240 days. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's not like they approve it. They're like, oh yeah, we love the ETF and we approve it. It's got to go through that 240-day process. So when you're talking about, we're 252 days from the Bitcoin halving, it would be really interesting if BlackRock and Fidelity were added in the next in the next 10 days, and then that 240 days is right around the Bitcoin halving. Their 240 days right around the Bitcoin halving. So
that's
yeah, interesting.
so interesting. And seeing as you've already kind of mentioned it, how, we are, in my personal opinion as well, I do expect a pullback. I don't see us just continuing on up from here because, again, they're not going to be buying Bitcoin at 30K. I would love to share a little bit of what I see for the astrology around the new moon, which is today for our listeners. Happy new moon in Leo, guys. So it's really similar astrology between the 13th of August to the 16th of August. So 13th of August being that Venus inferior conjunction with the sun in Leo. And then on the 16th of August being the new moon in Leo. There's really similar astrology happening for Bitcoin. Now, specifically, the new moon is happening in the first house, which is the house of self, or for financial astrology, we associate it to the shareholders. Now, last episode, we spoke about the traders and that being the sixth house. Whereas here, when we're talking about the first house, I really believe that it's like the investors, it's the portfolio holders of Bitcoin that are going to be affected around this time by this new moon. Now, when we have the new moon, we typically create local tops. And so we're looking for a turnaround and coming back down in general towards the full moon. Now, with this Venus inferior conjunction with the sun, we spoke about it last episode, that I do feel like price will come significantly down. Now, is it going to happen immediately? Maybe, maybe not. Astrology just kind of gives us time ranges. And what's so interesting about this new moon is that it's directly in opposition to the natal Neptune of Bitcoin. And Neptune, when it comes to this, Neptune actually, the more that I learn about it, the more I realize it also has a lot to do with health. And what I really got from this is like, during this new moon, Bitcoin is going to be sick. Like, the word that came to me was like, this is going to be a purge. So again, for me, that immediately just makes me feel like, okay, Bitcoin's coming down. It's going to be affecting those people that are really the holders of Bitcoin, that have Bitcoin in their portfolios. And also we have the sun, which then is also, of course, opposition the natal Neptune, because new moon, the moon and the sun are on the same side. And that is a representation of exhaustion. It's like, we're here talking about Bitcoin and how we're so proud of it for holding up during this time. And I feel like Bitcoin's done. Like Bitcoin's like, I'm exhausted. Like, I just need a break, guys. And also another thing that I thought was really interesting is that Uranus is also square natal Neptune. So natal Neptune is really getting hit hard. And that's like where it's kind of like testing its sanity. We're going to talk again about Uranus soon, with something else interesting that's happening with Uranus in general. But with Uranus, it is such a key planet for financial astrology because it shakes things up, and it's testing Bitcoin's sanity. It's creating confusion, and it's feeling disconnected. Now, on top of that, seeing as we're talking about Uranus, now the natal Uranus of Bitcoin has Mercury. in its opposition. And even with that, Mercury represents what? It represents intellect. It represents the head, as the physical part of the body. It's literally like the head. And when it's in opposition, a challenging aspect to the natal Uranus of Bitcoin, it's headaches, anxiety, nervousness. It's like this ugly volatility, again, to the downside, is just being confirmed for me. Now, there were a few other kind of like not so fun aspects at the moment, or around this new moon time, with Mercury conjunction the natal Saturn, which is happening in the 3rd house. So that's all about means of communication. This made me think maybe some sort of news will come out around Bitcoin that will see this significant drop. But to kind of end it on a bit more of a positive note in regards to this new moon period, is that we do have a Jupiter, which is trine the natal sun of Bitcoin. And Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of abundance. And it's also, one of the outermost planets. So it can give us more of like a long run emotion or a long run feel around this. And I feel that this Jupiter trine the natal sun does give us hope for the long run, for its future plans, and that this is really just an opportunity for Bitcoin to go through this purge, go through what it needs to go through. This is also happening in the 10th house, which again is around regulation. So it's funny because in my notes before we started recording this, I actually already wrote ETFs ? Could something like kind of just be happening in behind the scenes around the ETFs? But it's just not its time yet. It's just not its time yet. It's preparing. This regulation stuff is currently just holding it back. So it's not all dead and over for Bitcoin. Absolutely not. It's written all through the astrology. We're just getting started. And so I loved seeing that kind of like slither of like a golden line through a bit of the darkness that Bitcoin's going to go through soon. But again, growing pains, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always that element. It's never a straight line. It's never a straight line navigating through the regulation. Adoption is not a straight line, and it's just about being able to sort of ride that out and recognize where we're going in the long term and really take advantage of those times. Like for Bitcoin, I really don't see a pullback as a negative, to be honest. Like I get excited for a pullback. So, and it's really about like positioning yourself to be able to take advantage of those pullbacks and be ready for them and have those orders set in. So we also have some conversations around Mercury retrograde. At the time of the new moon, it's in Virgo, but then we also have that move. So again, we've got Mercury is communication, intellect, and rational thinking. And so you're probably feeling it at the moment, this more analytical, detailed-oriented nature, precision, organization, and, focus on the practical. And that comes from that Virgo element. So the shadow side of Virgo can be this like desire for perfection, which can really hold you back. And again, like we've seen this period of, just kind of stagnation, really. And because it's more of like this very conservative approach. And so I think we've been experiencing that. And again, you've got it's all about, Virgo is all about Mercury is all about communication. And so we're seeing a lot of that. I think it has been more detail orientated. And coming into this new moon, the communication, it is about the smaller details. These ETFs, like, okay, everybody got excited when they announced that they were launching, but like, let's get into the nitty gritty of actually what is the process? that they're going through to get these approved. Like, so there's a lot of that kind of like precision energy is what I feel.
Yeah, that's so true. It has been a lot of I just feel like over analyzing. I personally feel that too. Um, and having to like release that. So I think that's a really interesting thought there.
Yeah,
And I kind of feel like that's in general what the world has been doing right now with over analyzing everything that's going on. Um,
totally.
yeah, yeah. And so we actually have specifically, so at the moment we are, and as you guys are listening to this, we are still in pre-Mercury retrograde. And I find that Bitcoin is more affected during pre-Mercury retrograde than the actual full Mercury retrograde. Now, it's fully going into Mercury retrograde on the 23rd of August. And we also have another interesting event happening around that time, right, Claire?
We do. So BRICS, we have the BRICS nations a meeting on they start in South Africa on the 22nd of August. And,
Wild.
there's a lot of talk around, I mean, there's a lot of things that they're talking about for sure, but one of the things that's being sort of thrown around is a gold-backed currency. So some people think that it will be announced during this meeting. Some people think that it won't, but it's definitely coming. And some other people even think it's going to be Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to be Bitcoin. I'll just put that
Neither.
out there. I do think it's going to be gold back for a couple of reasons, you know. And the reason I think that it is coming as well, I agree with the people that, think that it is definitely coming, whether it's announced at this meeting or whether it's announced later down the track. But all of these countries are developing their own CBDCs. And so, but they are likely to create and use a common settlement currency, and that will be backed by something. So I think it's more likely to be backed by gold than Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And because there's so many things that have shifted even for gold in the last few years. The Bank of International Settlements reclassified gold as a tier one asset. They wouldn't have done that if it wasn't going to be significant for securing the system in some way. Central banks have been repatriating their gold, and we've seen Russia, China, India, South Africa, and we can even add Saudi Arabia to that list. They have bought more gold in the last 18 months than any time in history.
Wow.
So something's going on with gold. So that's quite interesting. And again, as it's about the communication. When it's Mercury retrograde, it's about the intellect, it's about the communication. And so during that time, is this going to be announced? Are they going to be talking about that they're going to be moving forward with it? There are a lot of countries that have come out publicly. India, I think it was also South Africa that said we have no intention of creating a BRICS nations currency. So, that's very Mercury retrograde communication, confusion, creating confusion when all of the practical signs are pointing towards there will be one at some point, yet they're coming out publicly and saying, oh, we've never even talked about that. We're not interested in doing that. So, yeah, so
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
That is super interesting. And, it's funny every time we like talk about these sorts of things, my mind always goes back to, well, yeah, Saturn is in Pisces and Saturn is retrograde in Pisces and still will be for quite some time. And so I'm constantly just like waiting for the illusions. Where are all the illusions? And eventually they do pop out. Of course, it's all going to come out in the October eclipses, most likely, because that's when everything's exposed. And also Neptune is still in retrograde in Pisces. So there's just a lot of the behind the scenes and things that are not being fully spoken out loud about that are just going on. And it's there for us to see, but not in the wide open. Like you just said, they've been buying gold and heightened activities of them buying gold. But that then they come out and be like, oh no, we never even spoke about it. It's kind of like, it kind of feels like, to try and be focused on a positive side, it's kind of like the parents when they try and protect the children and they don't want them to know everything. That's like the feeling I get, but I'm like,
yeah, I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it's always, when people are in positions of power in government, and I would even say this about, Jerome Powell and things like that. Like, one of his main jobs is communicating in such a way that it doesn't cause people to rush into something, for either spurred on by greed or either spurred on by fear. They don't want to cause these disruptions and imbalances in the markets in any way, shape, or form. So it's, I think there is a skill in, and a recognition that government officials are not going to give you the full information because they don't want people to panic until they've actually figured it out themselves. That's really giving them the benefit of the doubt, by the way. But, I think that there needs to be an element of that as well, because, we don't want crazy markets either. And, people just rushing into things because they think, well, that's going to go up, or, those kind of things. And it really causes like imbalances in the market, and, just makes the markets a little bit weaker and a little bit harder to interpret as well. But there is something, since you said about, Saturn and Pisces and these little glimpses of, popping out from the illusion. Fitch downgraded the US credit rating a couple of days ago, citing mounting debt and political divisions. So I feel like I talked about it in one of the other episodes about this, like Pisces really having this illusionary quality. We'll talk about it a little bit when we talk about the full moon as well. But it's like I spoke about how, it's called the American dream. It's not called the American reality. And, that American dream, optimism and hope is really much more marketable than reality, and that American dream has really driven the American rule for the last 100 years or whatever. And and the hope of that dream has really kept things running, whereas the American reality is more, yes, you can borrow a lot to buy a house, you can lease a car, you can create a lifestyle on credit cards. And maybe some people living in other countries. So it's not exactly the same as the American dream. That's the American reality. And it keeps you locked into this system of, continually working and having to meet those debts, the demands of those debts. And maybe to people living in other countries, that is a dream in some way, because they're still, working really hard and stuck in these jobs, and they don't have access to the debt to be able to create a lifestyle in that way. But it's still, you have these glimpses of reality coming through. And I think this downgrade of the credit rating is one of those glimpses of American dream versus American reality. And some analysts have said that it should have been downgraded even more. Other investors and hedge fund managers are not even worried about it. They're not bothered by the rating downgrade. So, but I think it's just it is an indication of like, we're not living the American dream here. We're living the American reality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so interesting to see all these just shifts and changes. And, as we continue to say, year of transformation, and it's happening in all areas. And, what's so interesting too, on the 27th of August, we have Mars shifting out of Virgo into Libra. And even just as you were talking about BRICS Nation and maybe them like not fully announcing things, or these shifts and changes also around like the credit systems. And I heard some uncomfortable clips of Gary Gensler talking about social credit scores and whatever. I'll leave that up to you guys to go and Google and have fun looking into that, because I don't even want to put energy towards that. But Mars shifting into Libra. So let's remember Mars is the planet of war, of aggression. And Libra is the sign of justice. And I wonder what it's going to spark, because we're going to be in that. I have it here until the 12th of October. So, that's over a month. And I feel like Mars in Libra is where people get to kind of like pull out their swords and like stand up for like what they believe in. And so I wonder, like, even with this whole BRICS things, what kind of announcements they might have. Or if you can think of anything else that might be coming up, and then just the people standing up for just like what they believe is fair and what they want to stand up for and fight for and their rights. Yeah, I think that's an interesting date to keep an eye out of too.
Sure.
27th of August.
27th of August. Okay, interesting, because Mars is currently in Virgo. So it's like Mars is that energy, action, and assertiveness, right? And so at the moment, it's in that like very kind of practical, analytical sign of Virgo. And so it's like energy to, it brings that Mars aggression and fire towards a methodical, sort of efficient endeavors in a way. So it almost sort of, I won't say balances it out in the way that they nullify each other's energies, but it sort of gives this more directional energy. And then, as you said, leading into to Libra, which is all about justice and things like that. But what came to mind for me is like, what does that look like for people in terms of like standing up for what they believe in, fighting for what is right? Because, previously we sort of see that as people coming out and they're protesting and they're marching and things like that. And I just don't see that as an effective way to do things anymore. I'm not criticizing that anybody that feels like they want to do that or as part of a union and they strike and they do that, that's entirely up to you. But I find it so fascinating watching these strikes that are going on in America at the moment. In Hollywood, they've had the writers' strike, which has been going on for quite some time. And then they now have the SAG-AFTRA actors as well, that are going on strike. So they're not allowed to make any movies, promote any movies. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of the things that they're talking about in there are royalties when things are sold to other networks, royalties for the actual actors. And they're also talking about these clauses about using their images, using their likeness. And what has sort of come out, which I think people are very shocked about, is that the actual production houses or studios, once the actors have made a movie with them, they own the rights to that movie. And what they also own is the rights to the likeness. So if you've made a movie with them, they can digitally recreate your likeness and produce as many movies as they want. What? So these are the sort of negotiations. Yeah. I was like, wow. And so these are the sort of negotiations that are coming out. But I feel like the way to negotiate this, so they're sort of pushing back on, the use of AI and eliminating them from the movie making process. Now, obviously that won't happen entirely, but I do sort of think like, why would a studio want to use an up and coming actress when they can use the digital likeness of Audrey Hepburn or Marilyn Monroe? Or, I think we're going to see like things like that happen. But so for people that are still alive, they can have their likeness in a movie that has nothing to do with them. They're making no money from this. It's kind of crazy to think about, but the way that they're going about standing up for their rights, obviously this sounds wrong. It doesn't sound fair. But is that they're going out, they're going on strike. So they're almost pushing the studios into, well, we can't make movies at the moment because the actors are on strike. So how are we going to do it? Well, can we do it with AI? It's almost pushing them in the opposite direction of where you want them to be going. Now, obviously, I think there's going to be some balance in this. As I said, I think with all of this kind of like AI stuff, I think that things that are real are going to make a real comeback, in a way. And I think that there's always going to be this element of, people that are really talented actors and really talented writers and people with ideas, they're almost going to partner with the new technology, and there's going to be space for that. And it's going to create something new. But in the meantime, there's a lot of back and forth. So it's interesting that you say that in terms of justice. And I think what we need to really what I'm kind of, channeling from that is that we need to really recognize, like, what is the outcome that we desire? What does justice look like for us in our own personal life? And what is it that we want to stand up for? And what is the best way to achieve those goals? Because I don't think taking to the streets and protesting seems to be particularly effective anymore, especially as it once was. But it's more, how do I navigate this terrain and make myself unfuckwithable, basically, and, taking that back into Bitcoin again, it's like that self-custody element, DCAing into Bitcoin. This Bitcoin is literally unfuckwithable money. And so
literally,
it's how do I position myself that they can't fuck with me?
Yeah, 100%. And, I'm going to take that also as an opportunity for, and those people that like hear us even in like other social medias or like my students, they know that like I am going to use the word nagging, because it's kind of like a mother that like wants to nag like their daughters and sons and be like, if you do not own your private keys, you do not own your crypto. If you are currently holding your Bitcoin, ladies and gentlemen, on Coinbase, on crypto.com, on Binance, on Bybit, on any of these what we call centralized exchanges that do not give you access to your private keys, you are not holding Bitcoin on a chain. That means you are holding Bitcoin off chain, which is just like on an order book, but you don't actually own your crypto. So you might be walking around thinking you have this unfuckwithable money, but you don't. So because I love you, I'm going to tell you that you need to shift your crypto, no financial advice, but because I love you, shift your crypto, please shift your crypto to somewhere where you have something called your private keys, some that you could use. I'm not affiliated with any of these, neither is Claire. We're not affiliated, but you can look into something like MetaMask. Even that's not fully decentralized. That is a hybrid, but at least you have access to your private keys. Something like Exodus. Honestly, if you can start looking into something that we call cold storage, like a Trezor, that is actually where you get to store your crypto completely offline, but on chain, because you have what's called your private keys. One last thing to that, even there, if you're like, oh, Corinne, I got this. I got my Trezor. I have my Exodus. My Bitcoin is on there, but you don't have your private keys written down, pen and paper, and stored somewhere safe, you still are at a risk of you potentially losing your crypto. So get your private keys, then write down your private keys and keep that stored somewhere so that you then are actually in ownership of that money. This is really important. And I say that with so much love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then pivoting into something which is also not decentralized at all, but is still kind of innovative and interesting for the crypto space, is that we have PayPal has launched their own stablecoin called
Oh my God.
USD. Yeah. So it's
You know why I laugh with that? You know what one of the first things that went through my head was when PayPal launched this? I was like, yeah, because you withheld so many people's money that you now have enough money to back your own stable coin.
yeah,
Like, oh my God.
I was gonna pivot into that part as well.
Oh,
But
you were?
yeah, definitely, because that is one of the things that you have to be
Mm,
aware of. But I mean, look, PayPal
mm,
was one of the most innovative payment systems of its time. It really shifted online payments. Like, it was a really important part of that evolution. And so, yeah, they launched a couple of days ago. They announced the launch of PayPal USD, and it's the firm's own US dollar-backed stablecoin. It's issued by Paxos Trust Co. Um, and which is really interesting because if you will remember a few episodes ago, we talked about Paxos sort of being attacked because it also issued BUSD, which is Binance's stablecoin. And by New York, I think, was the state that really went after them. And so we even said during that episode that the attack really was more directed at Binance. It was sort of the only way that the US could attack Binance. And Paxos, I think, is actually a really good company. They're very, very transparent with what they do. They're heavily regulated. And so that was obviously more about Binance than it was about Paxos, because now they've been approved to launch this stablecoin and issue this stablecoin with PayPal. So it all depends on who you're friends with in the regulators, I guess, who the companies are friends with in the regulators. Binance obviously pissed a lot of people off. PayPal is very friendly with the regulators. It'll be issued on the Ethereum network as an ERC20 token and is backed by PayPal's short-term treasuries, dollar deposits, and cash equivalents. So not fully one-for-one dollar backed, though. So it's not completely out of the blue, because PayPal does already support transactions with crypto like Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Litecoin in its app. And the company secured a New York bit license last year in June, which enables customers in the state to engage in crypto transactions as well. And New York is one of the highest bars for regulation across in the world.
yes.
It's really tough to get regulation from New York. So
yeah,
the impact could be pretty considerable in a positive way. I mean, just looking at like eBay, 70% of eBay transactions are processed through PayPal. So if that shifts over to using their, stable coin, I mean, this is quite like an integration of Web2 into the crypto ecosystem. Like, it really is quite a powerful bridge. And but as we sort of just hinted at, there are some potential downsides, as PayPal has the ability to freeze that stable coin at any time, and it's something that you should definitely be aware of, especially considering that PayPal has a history of limiting and restricting accounts. So yeah, that's really it. Also, it's interesting that they decided to launch it on Ethereum, because they had originally planned to launch the stable coin on Solana, but after the FTX incident, they've gone with Ethereum ERC20 token instead. So and the other thing that I kind of laughed at, but I just roll my eyes at in true crypto fashion, something for everyone listening to this should be aware of. You need to stay cautious of fraudulent tokens, because even as of a couple of days ago, since the announcement, there's almost 30 fake PYUSD tokens that have appeared. So just be really careful that you're interacting with the real one.
That's ridiculous. And actually, that just reminds me, X, right? We spoke
Mm,
about how Twitter has now become X, the amount of X coins. Guys, there is no X coin. Elon Musk has not launched an X coin. If you are in an X coin, it's a scam. So please be careful. But I do feel like this PayPal news is really great crypto adoption, which is what we want to see. We want to see these types of integrations and growths because, again, it just allows for more and more people to start to adopt even just the ideas behind the crypto space. That just reminded me, I read just earlier today, seeing as, you were kind of just mentioning it's not what you know, but who you know sometimes.
mm.
So, for these kinds of companies to be building certain types of relationships is very important. And Binance has not been so friendly with the SEC, and that's why they are currently not operating in the US anymore. But as of today, I believe Binance actually became El Salvador's first licensed crypto exchange. And Binance now is licensed across 18 countries. Some of the ones on the list there are Dubai, France, Italy, Spain, Japan, and Sweden. And now they've just added El Salvador as well. So it's interesting to see also the various exchanges kind of expanding around the world, who accepts what. But it's all like these, like you just said, like just partnerships and who they like. Um, it's it's a very interesting monopoly game
For sure,
that is
because
being played.
definitely, I think in the
Mm,
US, it's really like the SEC sort of attempts to rule with an iron fist. And I think a lot of people assume if you're ostracized from the US, then it means that everywhere in the world is out. You're out everywhere in the world, whereas that's just not the case for Binance. And I think a
yeah.
lot of the times what it is that there's this sort of inference that, oh, well, the SEC doesn't approve of you, so therefore they must know something that we don't, and you must be dodgy. Whereas that's not actually
Mm,
true. Like in the case of Coinbase, they're just like, no, we're not agreeing to your ridiculous terms. And so we'll take it to court, and I think that that's probably the same thing with Binance. Not saying that there aren't dodgy things. I have absolutely no idea to make a call on that. But just because the SEC hates them, then
literally.
it doesn't automatically mean that there are dodgy things. It may just well be that they have said, we're not abiding by your terms, your restrictive terms. We're not running our business in that way. So, yeah, so it's
Yeah.
interesting. El Salvador, a couple of other countries on that list, they still, you know, obviously they were able to negotiate terms with Binance that were acceptable to both parties. So,
Yeah, no, it is super interesting and so many shifts and changes this year. I still feel like, by October when we're going to have this eclipse season, there's still plenty of shifts and changes to come. And one more really interesting change that we're seeing in the planets before the next full moon in Pisces is Uranus.
mm,
As I did say earlier, Uranus is such an important planet when it comes to financial astrology, but really for our world at the moment, because Uranus has been in Taurus for quite some time. And as of the 29th of August, it's going into retrograde. So we had a episode where we spoke quite in depth about Uranus, and how it really is like the planet of innovation and revolution. And it creates a lot of like unpredictability. So, especially while Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus, which is an earth sign, which is stability, security. And it being earth has actually gone and created earthquakes because Uranus, literally the planet that rules earthquakes. So we've seen earthquakes happen already this year in various places around the world, but also we brought up the fact of, potential shakeups happening also around our material world. And especially as it goes into retrograde, especially finances, food, the environment. So this is really interesting that it's coming up, as I think that, Bitcoin, we will see start to take a bit of a tumble. What do you think about this one, Claire?
Yeah, I think Uranus is a really interesting one. Like it's the great awakener, it's all about the unconventional, creativity, originality, and revolution. So that even ties in with what you were just saying, about Libra, about justice, about truth, about balance, honesty, and so that it really sort of has that vibe of that. So Uranus it really is a great awakener, planet of change, disruption, and liberation. And it's also sudden changes, like sweeping reforms. The last time that Uranus was in Taurus was from 1943 to 1941. So it was the Great Depression, World War II, and then a few years later, Bretton Woods. And they had massive financial reforms with the IMF and then the US dollar becoming the global reserve currency. So it really is that time of change, disruption, and ultimately leading, though, to liberation. So it's not just change and disruption, on the negative, it's to shake things up to liberate. And so, I think that could be really interesting too.
Like we said last episode, ladies and gentlemen, buckle up, because it's going to be a bumpy ride, but we're headed in the right direction. We like to focus on the light.
Exactly, we do. We want to stay in the light. I mean, this year it's bumpy. It's really, like you said, growing pains is a really beautiful way to describe it. You can't grow without growing through these shifts, these changes, the shedding, the pruning. And, we want to make sure we want to allow Bitcoin to have those cycles as well, right? And not be scared or not be upset when those things are happening, and just know that like there is, it is in the interest of liberation. When it's Uranus, that's the goal. It's about liberation.
Yes, and Uranus also is it rules Aquarius, and we are in the Aquarian age, so it's all about that. That's where we're headed. And I think that kind of perfectly brings it into what is going to be our next full moon, which we're headed towards, which is the 30th of August. And it's happening in dreamy, divine Pisces. So that's what we're headed towards now. Today, for you guys, on this new moon, it's just about really setting those intentions. Hopefully all of the release is over and you can really start to head towards what I believe is just like a higher energy, a higher vibration, even a higher just version of yourself, where when you get into that full moon in Pisces, you'll really be able to step into that 5D, that dreamland, but making your dreamland become your reality. Because at the end of the day, first you see it in your mind and then you hold it in your hands. And I feel like there's this beautiful flow between those two energies from this new moon in Leo headed towards that full moon in Pisces. And I feel like, even though, man-made calendar says from January to December, I feel like we're really heading into this energy of like a new year, a new something is coming soon. And it happens more and more frequently because we are shifting so quickly through just the shifts and changes. And it's like, really, really by the end of the calendar year, we're going to see a whole new world. I mean, if you already start to look back now from the start of this year, just how many shifts and changes we've had. So I feel like in between this man-made calendar year, we've just had so many new years. And I feel like this is another one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the combination, the beautiful quality between this time between the Leo new moon, which is really about like, you know, desiring from your heart, like what is in your heart? What do you desire? What's in your heart? And living from that space and moving into the space of Pisces, which is very dreamy. It's like allowing yourself to dream what's in your heart, you know, the desires of your heart, bringing them into that dream space. And then it's then the process is from the metaphysical into the physical. And so it's kind of a beautiful process. And I think with the Pisces full moon as well, we can sort of expect to see some of the illusions as well, some illusions that we've held maybe in ourselves or about the world that we live in. We will release those. Those will be released. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there too.
Beautiful. And well, so everybody play safe when it comes to crypto in these next 2 weeks. If it hasn't happened yet, buckle up for the purge. But remember, it's just part of the process, the growing pains. We accept the purge because we get to heal from it.
Yeah. And it creates space for the new as well. You know, the purge isn't that creates space, right? And it clears out what's not necessary, what's not coming with us into the next phase. So it's good.
Amazing.
Awesome. On that note, shall we close?
We should. Yeah. I think happy new moon.
Yeah. Happy new moon in Leo. Enjoy.
To everybody. Everybody make sure that, really get those intentions down from the heart.
Absolutely. See you in a couple of weeks.
Peace and love and Bitcoin.
Peace, love and Bitcoin.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bitcoin Zodiac podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussions about the evolution of Bitcoin viewed through the lens of financial astrology. This podcast does not offer financial advice, so please make sure you do your own research. And stay tuned for our next episode where we will continue to dive deeper and build off these perception-expanding topics. Remember, whatever your beliefs may be, we all have something to learn from each other, so stay curious, stay open-minded, and keep exploring the world of Bitcoin and astrology. As always, may the stars align in your favor and your crypto investments prosper. Until next time, peace, love, and Bitcoin.